What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Sam Waseka, and I'd be amiss if I wouldn't say thank you for all the support in the recent days. I've hit 2,100 subscribers in just under 2 weeks. We're on like 1,800, I think, and we've managed to push up, getting over 500 subscribers in such a short amount of time. So I do appreciate all the love and support. The timeline video that I made around, I want to say 6 months ago, about Ruben Amorim was completely blown up with over 40,000 views. So I really do appreciate it. And in this video, I'm doing something that I've done before, but stupidly in the video, I was using a different PC, a lot slower one than I'm using now, and it cut off half the video. So this one, I'm sort of remaking it. And because we know a bit more about Ruben Amorim now with context and the results he's been having, especially the results that Sporting have been having as well without Ruben Amorim, there's a lot more questions that have been asked. There's also the questions that have been asked previously in the previous video, which I will go back over. Just in case if you wanted to get my opinion on Ruben Amorim. Growing up as a Sporting fan, I've seen Ruben Amorim be sort of a nobody in terms of management to rise to the top, and obviously move to Man United just this past November. So I thought, you know what, let's remake this video with a bit more questions. Some of them, I say most of them, are regarding Ruben Amorim. There are some about certain players and some other things, but I thought I'd just give my 2 cents. If you do like this style of content and you have your own questions that you want to ask about Ruben Amorim that you think a Sporting fan might be able to answer, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and maybe we'll make this like a monthly / weekly thing. I don't know how this is going to go, but if you do like this style of content, please subscribe, let me know, give me your questions for Ruben Amorim. Also, make sure you follow me on Twitter and TikTok. The links are in the description below. So the first question comes from FDS34115. He says, good video, thank you. He says, you have an Iberian name and wear a Sporting shirt, but you have an English accent. Where are you from and who do you support? So those who have been subscribed for quite a while will know this story, but just in case you are new here, let me just sort of go back to the beginning. So I am in England. I've got the English accent, which throws a lot of people off, but I am raised from a Portuguese family, and that's how I became a Sporting fan. And, you know, I've been a Sporting fan all my life. Been 25 years, nearly 26 years on this planet, and it's been a tough, let's say, 20 years of being a Sporting fan. The last sort of 4 or 5 years have been pretty great, to be honest, but, you know, the previous ones haven't been so good. So I've stuck by them through a lot of bad times. In terms of, do I support another team? No, I don't. I try to watch as much football as possible, but that being BPL, Bundesliga, Serie A. I've even dabbled in MLS and Saudi, of course. But for me, I'm Sporting through and through. I do not have the time to go support and buy merchandise and do all the other things that you would do for sort of another team that you support. And I just couldn't do it. 2 teams is not for me. So no, I'm a Sporting fan through and through. I understand the accent throws a lot of people off, but yes, I am from a Portuguese family. I'm a second-generation immigrant, and hopefully, God willing, when I have kids, they will also be Sporting fans, or I will be very disappointed. So the next 2 questions are similar, so I'm going to include them both together. And the first one is from ACA CKC 9138, and he says, you mentioned how good it is at bringing players to the club, but how much of that is Ruben Amorim, and how much is that down to the sporting director who's going to City, Hugo Vanna? I feel signings and recruitment is above the manager's head, so it might be out of Amorim's hands. And the same question comes from RGK-SE4KP. He says, how important do you think Hugo Vanna was in comparison to Ruben Amorim? So I'm not going to take anything away from Hugo Vanna. He's done a great job, and he did a great job at Sporting. But if you look at it on paper, the signings he brought in before Ruben Amorim, you have Jesse Rodriguez, who just got relegated with Stoke. You have Yannick Bolasie, who just come off an ACL tear. You have Fernando, who was a loan, to be fair, he's gone on to do well, but was injured when he was brought in. Didn't play a single game. You've got guys like Thiago Ilori, who were brought in, and, you know, I think that writes itself. He was absolutely awful. Rafael Camacho was brought in for £4.5 million, despite not having a lot of first-team experience from Liverpool. And then if you compare it to when Ruben Amorim comes in, you've got the likes of a Pedro Gonçalves, you've got Nuno Santos, you've got the big hitters like Diamonde, Victor Gyökeres, and Hjulmand, Trincao, and all the others there, and even guys that have been sold on for a lot more profit, guys like Manuel Ugarte, who of course now plays for Manchester United, and you've got a few others who have been flipped in that aspect as well. So is that all down to Hugo Vanna? No, of course there's scouting teams, and that's a whole different thing. But I think if you look at the comparisons between Hugo Vanna's before Ruben Amorim was there, when he had managers like Silas, and he had managers like Marcel Kaiser. There wasn't a substance with the transfers. It was just bringing the big names. And of course, that could be down to the manager. But in my humble opinion, I think Hugo Vanna does have to take responsibility for the good and the bad. You can't just reap the rewards of another manager. You can obviously blame the managers if you want. But Hugo Vanna is the one who signs the deals, gives the money, etc. So for me, I think Hugo Vanna is a good sporting director. And part of me does think at Manchester City it's going to be quite easy to be a sporting director because, you know, they have unlimited wealth. They can get any players they want. So far, I think they've brought in Ait Nouri from Manchester City, while Hugo Vanna's been there. Nico Gonzalez from FC Porto as well. And there's a few other signings that have come in that's probably going to... They get Marmoush, of course, and the Kusharanov. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. But those have sort of been under Hugo Vanna's reign. So, to me, I think Ruben Amorim was more important. But that's not to say Hugo Vanna wasn't at all. I think, for me, Hugo Vanna did grow. And I think that was the main thing. He grew with Amorim. So, when Amorim got better, so did Hugo Vanna. Finding a guy like Victor Gyökeres is incredible for the amount of money. Same with Coutis Simuka. Two, I'm not going to say relatively unknown because they were still playing for decent teams and had decent exposure. But for the prices they were bought in for, even guys like Pedro Gonzalez, who's arguably a club legend, Manuel Ugarte was sold for £70 million. Just guys like that, they were managed to find so cheap and then flip on is just incredible. So I do think Hugo Vanna has grown. But if you're asking me personally, I think it's more down to Ruben Amorim than it is Hugo Vanna. So this next comment comes from Isaac19-T4D. And this is in response to the final that Amorim lost against Spurs. Man United lost against Spurs. He said, is this common for Amorim? How did he do in cup finals for Sporting? Now, I think everyone can agree Amorim approached that game wrongly and his in-game management was bad. And I will say, in finals for Sporting, it was sort of a mixed bag because you had a feud where he did really good. He beat Benfica in the Taça da Liga in, I believe, 2022. So that was a good result. And he also won the Taça da Liga before that with Sporting. He won it 2 years in a row in 2021 and 2022. However, his last few years at Sporting, he was in 2 cup finals. He was in the Taça de Portugal final and was in, technically a Supertaça isn't a final, but I guess it is in the Supertaça final. If you look at both of those games, he lost them both to Porto. If you look at the Taça de Portugal one from 2024, we were down to 10 men, so I don't really blame Ruben Amorim for that one. We managed to lose in extra time. The lads held on well, but unfortunately it just wasn't that. I don't blame Ruben Amorim for that. However, the last final he competed in with Sporting was that Supertaça. And we were 3-0 up at one point, or 3-1 up at one point even. And we managed to lose 4-3 in extra time. And a lot of people were saying that he should have brought on Marcus Edwards, who could have changed the game a lot during that time. There's a few players on the bench that he waited ages to bring on. I think he even brought on like Rodrigo Ribeiro at one point. Just before extra time had started. But I think in that game there was a clear tide that was going Porto's way, especially sort of like 3-2. Even when they equalised, I think Amorim should have been a bit quicker with the substitutions. But in terms of, you know, cup finals in big games, it's a weird one because I think Ruben Amorim is sort of 50-50. You look at the game, for example, against Manchester City in that same season, 4-1, game plan executed flawlessly. But then if you go to that Porto one, you're not so much. And even in other games that Ruben Amorim has been in, I know we managed to win that game, but his last game with Sporting was a 4-2. We'd go 2-0 down against Braga. So it's sort of a mix and match for Ruben Amorim. I think it's a bit 50-50. And I think it's a lot of this, you know, tactics that he wants to stick to. I've always said, he's probably the most stubborn manager I've ever seen. And I think that's probably a trait that he's just managed to not shake off. He doesn't like changing his tactics, as you can see. If he's got a squad in mind, you know, it's set. He doesn't change his mind often. We see him with Marcus Rashford, and even now Garnacho allegedly is leaving the club. Once he doesn't have a player in his plans, it's very difficult for them to get back in. But that being said, I think it was, I think with Sporting it's 50-50, but the common theme is Amorim is very stubborn. And maybe if he has the right players around him, maybe a bit more squad depth than he had at Manchester United previously, that could change. But I don't know how many new faces he's bringing in at United. Obviously, Cunha is already there, and Bueno might be next, but we don't know who else is coming in. Of course, there's a rumour of Victor Gyökeres, but who knows? I think, yeah, Amorim is very stubborn. That's pretty much the best answer out to that question. On a similar vein, Kamal asked, was he always like this and never had to adapt, or does he have a really big ego? Do you think he'll improve his adaptability, or is it calculated? This is a very good question because I feel like a lot of Sporting fans, and me included, kept saying that, oh, he'll just change with time. And he did a little bit last season when he brought in Gyökeres, because in the video I made about the timeline of Ruben Amorim, he did not want another striker other than Paulinho. He was like, no, Paulinho is the guy. And don't get me wrong, I love Paulinho. I've got his shirt there for a reason. But at the same time, he was not good enough on his own. And we needed a threat, a goal-scoring threat, someone like a Victor Gyökeres. But for lots of time, Ruben Amorim did not want to do that. He even had a quote saying that, oh, we won the league with just Paulinho and Thiago Tomas. So we didn't win titles when Lietzen was here, when guys like Slimani was here, these great strikers were here. And he was saying, you know, we won it with Paulinho and Thiago Tomas, so striker isn't the issue. And then he brings in a striker, or Hugo Vanna brings in a striker like Victor Gyökeres, and look how well they performed when he came in. I think Ruben Amorim obviously had a good team base, but as soon as Gyökeres came in, it elevated it to another level, and it was fantastic. So there was room for growth in Amorim's system, and I think at Man United, he's not going to get the same sort of leash he had at Sporting. At Sporting, he'd obviously come in and won the title in his first season and finished second in his second season. So there was quite a long leash to be like, you know, this is the guy that changed this club around single-handedly. So one bad season, which we, of course, finished in fourth, was, you know, the writing might have been on the wall then for another manager. But for him, it was like, okay, it's Ruben Amorim, he can stay. And then he was able to improve it next season. He's not going to have that leeway at Manchester United, especially after the season's results previous, of course, losing in the final to Tottenham, finishing, 15th in the league. He's not going to get that leeway. So I think he has to adapt. And I think the signings of Cunha and Mbeumo can definitely help that. Of course, he's promoted some youngsters off the B team as well, like Heaven was off the bench. I think, is it Godwill off the bench as well? Sorry, I'm going to mispronounce these names quite a lot. But those two guys that if he sees that are ready to come up, they can. And I think he needs to do a bit more of that to succeed. He can't just, open the checkbook and sign these big players. He's going to have to deal a little bit with what he has already and try and mold them. We saw it a little bit with guys like Diallo, who came in and were absolutely fantastic. I said Maguire could be someone that Amorim built his system around. And Maguire was pretty good for United, especially in the Europa League. Maybe not so much in the league, but I think he was a little bit more protected in a back three. Guys, of course, in Europe as well, they managed to show it a bit more. And it's clear that he really loves Mason Mount, and that will be someone who's integral to his system as well. He said it himself. So I think, he's going to have a lot more. He's not going to have a lot of leeway, but he's going to have a lot more to work with. He's going to go into a pre-season, not playing the Club World Cup. They've played in like a Malaysia friendly, but they're going to have a full pre-season with hopefully fit players. I don't know what the status of Luke Shaw is going to be, of Mason Mount is going to be. Of course, it was quite an injury-hit season for guys like them, and of course, Diallo picking up an injury as well. Pretty much the whole United team at some points picked up an injury. But if he does get the signings he needs, and he gets the pre-season, which he's going to get, and he's going to get a lot more players in, then I think he's going to have to adapt, especially because, they don't have Europe this year. But, like I said in a previous video, that could work to his favour. There's a less packed schedule. Amorim's never going to say it, right? He will always say, oh, we're not the favourites to this, we don't have any goals. The goal is to win the next game. But the goal next season should be Europe to get top 4 or get a cup run. So FA Cup, or both, I suppose, get an FA Cup, a Carabao Cup. But definitely the target should be Europe. They have a less packed schedule than the bigger boys. Especially, think about it this way, the teams that play in the Club World Cup are barely going to get any rest. They're going to get like a month rest in pre-season and then straight back into it, even if that. So Amorim has a lot more time and a less packed schedule to get it right. And I think in pre-season will be important to see who he believes that will stay and who will go. But at the same point, like I said, he's going to have to adapt, and I think he will. At Kevin Day says, good vid, but is this the start of a comb over? Come on, man, it's not that bad, is it? I know it's not the best, but, the more you watch these videos, the more money I can get to go to Turkey or something. I digress, I'm only kidding. But no, the hair's fine for now, knock on wood. Now we're moving on to some other questions that aren't about Ruben Amorim. So Grant Philip 37 asked, what are your views on Bruno Fernandez and Manuel Ugarte? Interested in hearing your perspective as a Sporting to United fan. So Bruno Fernandez is one of the best players I've ever seen for Sporting. And I think he's done really well at United. But the thing is, it's not really translated to the rest of the team. And I think he's an easy scapegoat to point that out because his attitude is a bit of a, he's a moaner. He loves to moan. He loves to throw his hands up in the air. and he's got the eye of Roy Keane a few times and some other pundits as well. But I think that is the sign of a leader. For me, it's just like, you know, if they're winning and Bruno Fernandez is putting his hands up in the air and he's spraying his teammates, not doing the correct passes, you know, they're looking at it different. Like, look at Roy Keane, for example. He would do that on the pitch all the time, and he'd do it to his players. If you watch him on Tits Football, he'd always say he was quite critical in training and they tried very hard. But when the results aren't going your way, it looks a bit worse for someone like Bruno Fernandez. And, you know, but for me, I think without Bruno Fernandez, who knows where United would have been this year. And I know it's not what Man United fans want to hear, like, you know, because they should be competing this. They shouldn't be down here. But I don't think Bruno Fernandez is to blame for that. Can Bruno Fernandez be better in terms of attitude and in terms of performances? Potentially. I don't think he's a player without fault, but I don't think any United player is a player without fault. Do I think they should sell him to Saudi? Absolutely not. And the reason why is because the whole premise of selling Bruno to Saudi would be we get 100 million and we can rebuild the squad and we can promote within. But are you going to get a player right now in this current market that is good as Bruno Fernandes is, and you've already got him at the club, you've already spent the money for him, are you going to find a Bruno Fernandes replacement? I don't think so. There's obviously some great midfielders coming up and there's some great players in the Prem. You know, they've, like I said already, Cunha and Mbeumo would be great signings, but are they as good as Bruno Fernandes? I don't think so. I know Mbeumo had a very good season, but in terms of being good as Bruno Fernandes, I don't think so. So I would say not sell him. Give him a few more years. He's still a relatively young footballer. His injury record is still very good for someone at his age. He rarely gets injured. He's obviously the captain as well. And I assume that players like Bruno Fernandes. I know Ruben Amorim likes Bruno Fernandes, but for me, I think Bruno Fernandes should stay. And I think he is a great player. Again, not one without fault, but I think he definitely is Man United's quality, and even into the future Man United quality. In terms of Manuel Ugarte, it's a difficult one because I loved Manuel Ugarte at Sporting. He went to PSG and it didn't work out. And I've seen a lot of players, people say that Manuel Ugarte is a very clunky player. He's not very good on the ball. But from what I remember seeing him at Sporting, I thought he was actually pretty good on the ball. He's a defensive workhorse. I feel with Ugarte, there's a lot that doesn't show on the stat sheets and on sort of the football stat apps where it's like recoveries on blah, blah, blah. He does a lot of the dirty work that you probably don't see. But I do think he's been very disappointing. And I do think maybe for the money that they had, maybe they could have got someone else. But I guess it's all worked out really because he's, like I said, he's played in Amorim's system before. Maybe a new season with a pre-season under a new tactic, or under the tactic he's used to, he could get back to sort of that former self where he was at Sporting and doing very well. But at the same time, I don't know if he has a place next year. I think they are looking to get another midfielder in. You'd assume that Bruno is definitely one. It just depends who's going to play with him. Is it going to be Bruno Ugarte? Is Casemiro still going to be there? I did give 4 cheap players to sign for Man United. Some of you disagree with it, which is fine. Disagree all you want. I love having debates in the comments. That's fine. But I said Palhinha maybe might be a good example to bring on loan because he'd be cheap and, you know, it's a low risk deal if it is a loan, if Bayern would allow that, of course. But he'd give a lot more space to Bruno Fernandes to go to attack while Palhinha could stand a bit back. But I digress. That is a different video. If you want to watch that video, links in the description anyway. But at the same time, Manuel Ugarte does need to improve. And hopefully he will get that in the pre-season. I really don't see much value in selling him now. I don't think there will be a lot of clubs that want to buy him, especially to recuperate some of the money that United have spent on him. I think, you know, you're looking at United right now. Garnacho is on the way out. Eriksen and Lindelof had their contract expires, which I assume is a lot of wages freed up. They also want to get rid of Casemiro still. Johnny Evans, I think, also is released. There's a few other players that they will sell. But at the same time, I don't think Ugarte will be one of them. I think it's worth keeping him around. For now, I think maybe give him one more season, or at least until January, to try and improve his performances. Maybe it's the same like Palhinha. Maybe you have to loan him out with like an option or obligation to buy. But I do like Manuel Ugarte now. I still believe that there is a player still there. But at the same time, he's going to have to be a bit better in his performances. This comment comes from a strange username, Jack Meoff 454. Says, what are your thoughts on Morten Hjulmand? As a Dane and a long-time follower of Hjulmand's progression, his impact at Sporting, his top-class leadership quality he's shown throughout his career, and Hjulmand's been named the Sporting captain after one season at the club. Morten Hjulmand is a fantastic player. Fantastic player. Genuinely, never stops running. He always works hard. And to become captain of a club, one, that you don't speak the language of, and two, that you've only been at a one season, shows how good his leadership qualities have been. And Sebastian Coutis is another hero of mine, club legend of course, but at the same time, Hjulmand has come in and has been just as big as a captain and an influence as Coutis was. And I think that is so crazy considering one doesn't speak the language. And I guess Coutis didn't either, but he spoke Spanish, but you know, he's similar-ish. But Morten Hjulmand is a fantastic leader. And I think hopefully he stays for quite a long time. Hopefully that captain's armband, you know, gives him a bit more love for the club than it would be maybe someone like a Gyökeres or someone else who maybe wants to progress their career. But I think Hjulmand has been absolutely fantastic. A workhorse midfielder, but also fantastic on the ball. Decent shot power on him. He can score from outside the box. Sometimes he does lose his head with referees and sometimes against opposition. But I feel like he's still quite a young player and is still playing in a league that maybe he's not, you know, accustomed to, especially with referees. As a captain, the rule is you should be able to go to referees and have words, but sometimes the referees don't like it and give the yellow card straight away. But yeah, for me, Morten Hjulmand is fantastic, and I think any club in the Premier League should be looking at him as maybe a replacement from midfielder. Maybe not Manchester United, of course, because they've already spent a lot of money on midfielders. But, you know, he's a big Arsenal fan. He's got a tattoo of Arsenal, the cannon on his arm. I think he might have had it removed, but I'm not sure. So maybe that is one for Arsenal to take a look at. He was linked to Spurs, but I don't know how well that tattoo will get over with the Spurs faithful. But yeah, I think Morten Hjulmand is destined to be a great player if he's not already one. He's also done well for Denmark. He scored against England in the Euros last year as well. So he is doing well there. And I think, yeah, Hjulmand is destined to be, I think, one of the best midfielders in the world in a few years. And maybe that's hyperbole. But for me, I think if you watch him, you'll know that nothing I said there was wrong. He's a great midfielder. I think when he does get the eventual big move, hopefully it's not for another year or two, that he'll do very well. And World Cup being next year, maybe he does well with Denmark. Maybe they make a little run and maybe that's how he gets his move. But in terms of a captain, in terms of a player, just a really pretty old school midfielder, I would say, in terms of what he's able to do. But also, I just think he's fantastic. I can't say enough good words about Morten Hjulmand. Next question comes from Coutis Simuka. Sorry if I mispronounced that, by the way. Were any of these shirts behind you worn by the actual player, and do you actually speak or understand Portuguese? So first of all, let me just show you this bad boy. This is a match-worn and signed Paulinho jersey from a game against Sporting Braga last year. Paulinho was and still is one of my favourite players. He's since gone on to Toluca in Mexico, and he's done very well there. He's won the league title there. But I love Paulinho, man. And Sporting did this, partnership with an app called Match-Worn Football Shirts. They sign it and they send it to you, and I got it in a frame. I still need to hang it on the wall. I'm just being incredibly lazy. But yeah, Paulinho one is match worn. But in terms of the others, this Sebastian Coutis one here. So this one isn't match worn or anything. But what happened was that when Sporting won the league, that was the shirt I was wearing when we went to Sporting London Cafe, which if you've seen the video where we won the league, I was there then as well during COVID. Just before, you know, you were allowed outside, we weren't allowed inside. I can't remember the rules. But yeah, it has the train ticket in there as well. Let me move my head so you see bottom right, there's the train ticket of when we went, and it was just a memory for me. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to frame that. And Sebastian Coutis was the one who lifted the title after 19 years of being in the drought, so that one was very special to me. In terms of the other ones, I've got Pedro Gonçalves and Bruno Fernandez on the wall. They're not match worn shirts, they're just shirts that I had. I changed the background quite a few times, but you know, it just depends on how I'm feeling on the day. And in terms of these two shirts here, so this one is a Liedson shirt, which I found on eBay, and this one is a Fabio Rochenbach shirt. If you know your ball knowledge, these are two very great players. Liedson especially, one of my favourite players. These are both bought off eBay, and I think Vinted maybe, but they're very old school retro shirts. I just have them there as decor. I know you can't really see them in videos, but I just just have them there for a reason. But I will swap them out depending on like the day and the mood and how I'm feeling, and if the video is about a certain player, I'll put it there. If not, you know. But the Paulinho one will be hanging on the wall hopefully soon if I stop being lazy. But yeah, those are the only match worn shirt I have is that Paulinho one. Actually, tell a lie. I have this Thiago Ilori like training worn sporting jacket from like 2012, I want to say, before he made the move to Liverpool. The number's a bit worn off, as you would imagine. I think I found this on eBay as well, but you know, I thought, you know, a match-worn Thiago Lloris thing, you know, I think it was only like 20 quid. I don't really like rate Thiago Lloris that much as a footballer, but you know, I saw it there. I'm an impulsive buyer, so that was bought as well. Creator 4199 asks, would you please do a show explaining strikers like Gyökeres and maybe tell them what's made him different to Gonzalo Ramos, Jackson Martinez, and of course Darwin Núñez, and would you predict the same about Gyökeres? So I responded to many comments like this, but I'm going to say it in a video here as well. So I did make a video before, and it was a video just said what team should sign with Gyökeres, and I said Arsenal should be the favourites, and I think it was smart to go to Arsenal, but they've gone with Sesko. But anyway, let me tell you about Victor Gyökeres, and I've seen people compare him to Darwin Núñez, Jackson Martinez, Gonzalo Ramos, Ricky van Wolfswinkel. You name it, any average striker or below par striker that's gone to the league will get a comparison to Victor Gyökeres, and that'll be that. There's just one thing that is different though, and that is Victor Gyökeres is better than all of them. And that is not even an exaggeration. Darwin Núñez, when he left Liverpool, Benfica fans were celebrating that sale. Because Darwin Núñez was not great for Benfica. He scored a lot of goals, but if you watched any of his games at Benfica, 3 of the goals he scored that season were against a team that consisted of 9 men. And I'm not saying 9 men, 2 players got sent off during the game. Belenenses Sad started the game with 9 players due to COVID, and he scored 3 goals. Take away 3 goals from his goal tally, it's still impressive, don't get me wrong, but there is no chance that that is even close to Victor Gyökeres. Jackson Martinez was a great footballer, but he had many injuries. He is not a fair comparison. Gonzalo Ramos is still very young, and to be fair, he just won the Champions League with PSG, and I assume will be a Portuguese starter when Ronaldo retires, / if he ever retires. But Victor Gyökeres is different from them all. Why? Because Victor Gyökeres has scored every other game, and he literally does it more than just Portuguese teams. That is the biggest criticism I see of Victor Gyökeres. He's not going to get that much space in the Premier League, I'm told. He's not going to be able to do this in the Premier League. He won't have this much physicality in the Premier League. So, he's done it against Manchester City, and people use the argument, oh, they had Jamal Pusi at centre-back, he scored 2 penalties. Okay, I hear your arguments fine. He scored 2 penalties in the biggest game of his career, where the lights shone the brightest in the Champions League, and you think that is a negative. For me, that is a positive. He converted 2 penalties against Ederson, who is a great goalkeeper, and managed to stay composed enough to score both of those penalties in an environment like that. And his first goal was also very good. But okay, if you want to take Manchester City out of the equation because they had an injury-ravaged team, so did Sporting, by the way, but you want to take them out of the equation, that's fine. Let's go to another example. Benfica. Benfica had Nicolas Otamendi, who was just 2 or maybe 1 year removed off winning the World Cup with Argentina and still known as a powerhouse centre-back. Victor Gyökeres scored, I believe, 5 or 6 goals against Benfica since he's been in the league. And, you know, you could say, oh, you know, Otamendi's old. What about Antonio Silva, who's supposed to be one of the best young centre-backs in the league? Even guys like Thomas Araujo could not stop him. And I know what you're thinking, these are just smaller names. Okay, let's take Benfica out of the equation and let's talk about FC Porto. Pepe, who even at 41 years old, still managed to keep Arsenal, who were one of the best attacking sides in the world at that point, to no goals during his time when they faced, I think, last year or the year before. And they only won in extra time. No, I believe it was penalties they actually won in. And people even saw Pepe in the Euros this year, and Pepe was still a phenomenal centre-back. And Victor Gyökeres made him look silly on multiple occasions and scored goals. And there's other examples you can use. He scored against Lille in the Champions League. He scored against Atalanta in the Europa League last year. He can do it in Europe. He can do it in the Portuguese League, of course, but he can also do it against Man City. The argument is that Arsenal game. He did nothing against Arsenal. Well, I will give you that. That is completely true. However, if you look at the team we had and the manager we had just lost Ruben Amorim. He was under a new coach under João Pereira, who plays his striker a bit more further back. And we were awful under João Pereira because we couldn't beat Santa Clara or Moreirense or Gil Vicente. So I'm going to blame that on the manager. If I'm allowed one excuse, that is going to be it. But he can do it against these clubs. And obviously it's a risk. Any player you buy is a risk. Not just from the Portuguese league, which again is just, you know, I would say a lazy argument, because you can look at other strikers that have come in or other players from the Portuguese league who have excelled. Of course, there's Cristiano Ronaldo, there's guys like Nani. You look at Manchester City's team over the years, you've got guys like Ruben Dias, Bernardo Silva, even like Ederson. Look at the current favourites for the Ballon d'Or. Vitinha come from FC Porto. Rafinha come from Sporting and Vitória Guimarães. João Neves come from Benfica. So you can say, look at Ricky van Wolfswinkel, look at this guy, look at this guy, look at this guy. Look at who the best players in the world are and where they've come from, what leagues they have come from. If you look at Victor Gyökeres, the only comparison I would accept for a striker is Radamel Falcao, two of the best strikers that I have ever seen in the league. And Falcao, after leaving Porto, I think he won the Striker of the Year and actually made it into the Team of the Year at Atletico Madrid. He was phenomenal. And if you know your stuff, you're probably going to say, oh, look what happened when he went to United and Chelsea. If you know your stuff, even at Monaco he was fantastic, but he was ravaged by injuries by the time he went to United and Chelsea. So again, that is not a fair comparison, but a prime Radamel Falcao is a fair comparison. There is no doubt in my mind, and you can clip this, you can bookmark it, whatever. If Victor Gyökeres goes to the Prem, he will be fantastic. There will be no doubts about his price tag. There will be no doubts about his ability. He will shine 100%. But yeah, that is the end of this video. Thank you very much for watching. Have you got any questions you want me to answer about Ruben Amorim, about his time at Sporting, his time at Braga, Casapia, whatever, even his time at Man United? If you've got a question for me that you think I can answer, feel free to leave it in below. Maybe we'll make it a monthly thing. I don't know. But other than that, I've been Samuel Sega. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for 2,100 subscribers. I'll see you next time, and peace.